Hello and welcome back to more Dr. Logic Awkwardly Does Logic with a couple of cats. So let's talk about the soundness of the conjunction introduction rule. So what we want to show is that if everything in our proof so far has all gone well, then things will not get screwed up by applying conjunction introduction. Specifically, let's get that whiteboard up. What would we do without our trusty whiteboard? So there we go. Soundness of conjunction introduction. The idea is if we have a proof that applies conjunction introduction at some point in it, then assuming that everything we've done so far has already gone well, then this will also be truth preserving or sound. So what we want to show is, first of all, set things up. First, the awkward, let n be a line in our proof with annotation, conjunction introduction, I and j, where I is earlier in the proof and j is earlier in the proof. And of course, I doesn't equal j. So it is a correct application, correct instance of the conjunction and conjunction introduction rule. Now, what this means that there is a well-formed formula phi and psi on line n where phi occurs on line I and psi occurs on line j. Now, no, it doesn't matter whether I comes before j. We just need that both of them come before n. So that's an important thing to remember. So we've got these individual conjuncts earlier in our proof. Now what we want to do is, what we said is we want to show is like if everything we've done so far is good, then doing this step is also going to be good. So let's make this explicit. What we're going to do is we're going to assume that both the well-formed formula on line I and the well-formed formula on line j are true. We need to show that the well-formed formula on line n, the one that's justified by conjunction introduction, is also true. So what we do is we inspect the truth tables. We've got our assumption that phi is true and psi is also true. So then if you look at the relevant row of the truth table where both of the conjuncts are true, you'll see that the conjunction is also true. So whenever phi is true and psi is true, the conjunction phi and psi is also true. But that just is the formula on line n. So we've shown what we need to show. So to talk a little bit about the structure of this proof, because as I said, the structure of the next two that we're going to look like is going to be very similar. We have basic assumptions. We know that the rule we're trying to prove is sound is applied somewhere in our proof. And so we find the line where it's proved, and we look at the annotation. From that, we work back into what must have occurred earlier in the proof. And what occurs earlier in the proof is going to be simpler. It's going to be less complex. So we have just phi on one line and just psi on another, rather than the conjunction of the two of them. So they are less complex formulas occurring earlier in the proof. if we then assume that all of those steps that we made to get to those two conjuncts individually were all legitimate, then we know that we're not going to run into any problems if we conjoin these into a conjunction, because anytime that both of the conjuncts are true, the conjunction is also going to be true. So this is the structure that we will have for all of them. We will say, okay, what would it look like for a proof to have a correct application of this rule? So we know what the annotation on the particular line has to look like. We know what sorts of formulas have to have occurred earlier, either on individual lines or as part of a subproof. These are going to be earlier in the proof. They're going to be proofs of less complexity because they involve fewer moves in them. And we will make the assumption that if everything that we've done so far has worked, and then all we need to do is show that truth is preserved if we make one more step, namely, in this case, an instance of conjunction introduction. So there's that rule. We've got 2 more to go. Look for them in the next videos. I hope to see you then. Cheers.